We need more females to step in front of the camera and start sharing their unique experience with the world. In this video, I'm going to tell you why I feel this is true and hopefully inspire you to start taking action. I'm Amanda Horvath, and I'm all about helping business owners and entrepreneurs leverage the power of video without breaking the bank or taking up tons of their time. So if you're looking to use video in your strategy this year, then be sure to subscribe and click the bell to be notified every time I release a new video. Now, this subject is not an easy one to talk about. I have already done 3 different takes of this video just trying to get across my ideas, and to be honest, it's challenging to do that because it isn't something that a lot of people talk about. It's also kind of taboo to talk about because it's like male versus female, and I want to clarify the fact that that's not what I'm doing with this video. I'm actually not looking at the males at all. It's just looking at the females and starting to think about how we can approach things from that feminine energy versus the masculine energy, which has come from history, right? So when you look back at history and you look at the records that we have, the stories that we have, generally speaking, they come from white males. And I am not a white male. I'm not against white males. I actually think that white males are being beaten down in our society, so I'm not going to contribute to that narrative. But historically speaking, the stories that are found to be valuable are coming from people, typically white males, with fame, money, and success. So as a female, we have in our DNA gotten passed down this narrative that your voice is not as valuable as the man next to you. If you pay attention to this in everyday life, you are going to recognize the same narrative to be true. Personally, when I was doing videos for like event videos or conference videos or anything like that, anytime I would go up to a male and female and say, hey, would you be willing to do a testimonial for me? The female would inevitably say, I won't, but he will. It was like clockwork every single time. I could predict it happening, and it would happen, and I'd kind of talk through the females and try to convince them to get in front of the camera and make it happen. But there's something with video specifically that feels a little bit egotistical, and many females aren't willing to go beyond that point and be seen as egotistical in order to start sharing their stories. So I know this is very woo-woo, it's very out there, but I'm hoping that someone is going to resonate with this content. So if you are, go ahead and click like so I know that this is resonating with you and that I'm not alone here. So I'm going to turn this inside and show you guys how this really showed up in my life and talk through maybe my family lineage just a little bit, because I don't want to project outwardly and say that this is the reality for everyone. It's just a pattern that I've noticed and want to share my personal experience in this, and hopefully someone else will find value in that. So I come from a lineage of Eastern Europeans on one side, and on the other side, Texans. So on the Eastern European side, I never got to meet my grandmother. She passed away before I was born. My mom was pregnant with her. My mom was pregnant with me when she passed away, and I was actually named after her. And she came from literally my dad was born in a refugee camp, running away from communism or post-World War II in Austria. So our family is Hungarian, and he was born in a refugee camp in Austria as they were running away, moved to New York when he was 3. My grandmother was dealing with so much post-traumatic stress from the escape from Hungary and the nervousness of her family and her mother and being left behind in Hungary and not knowing what was going to happen to them because she ran away, that she actually had to give away my dad and have him be raised by the nuns for the first several months of his life. So this is the kind of trauma that has been passed down generations on this one side of my family. And it is embodied in my DNA, whether I like it or not. So you guys have probably heard about a lot of people talking about this. I feel like it's starting to come out that we need to heal generational traumas in order to really step into the power that we have today. And so I'm going to get back to that in a second. And then on the other side, the flip side, I think about my other grandmother who lives in Oklahoma, who is still alive and is such a beautifully amazing woman. And she grew up in a generation where you graduated with an MRS degree. And she's very much like this amazing, outspoken woman who is active. She was a fitness instructor for the majority of her life, yet she had to kind of default to her husband's desires and was attached to him, and that was her main identity. And it was interesting because I've interviewed her about her past and everything like that, and it's just a certain mindset that's very different than it is today. So only within one generation, when you look back, that is the reality of the previous generation. And I'm curious if this is resonating with you, if anything is standing out to you about how different your generation is, how different you are from just one generation above you. So when I was going about thinking about potentially doing video for my business, I had a lot of hesitation to really stepping in front of the camera and sharing my story. I was actually ashamed to admit that I didn't want to get in front of the camera and start sharing my story. Growing up, I was extremely introverted and I would always hide behind others. For example, I had a sister who was 18 months below me in age. I still have her. And I would tell her as a child, if we were out at a group or something and there was a leader, I would tell her, hey, can you go ask him about this or whatever. That's how introverted I was, just to give you the example. So when it came to me really stepping in front of a camera, I didn't feel ready. Yet the reality of my life, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments about complaining about whatever, being a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pretty girl or whatever, pretty girl problems. But when I was running my video business, I was consistently looked down upon for my looks, essentially. It was like, how can she know anything? And this is something that men will never totally understand. For example, there was one point where I was about to do a conference video and I go in with my subcontractor, my main subcontractor, who's a guy, and we walked in and we were talking to the head of the conference and what we were about to do there, and he did not acknowledge me once, despite the fact that I was running the project. He talked directly to my male counterpart. And this happened over and over and over again. So it kind of made me feel like they aren't valuing my opinion. They don't know how to talk to me or anything like that. And what I recognized was that I needed to step into the responsibility to educate them on us being different, on blonde hair, blue-eyed girls not being the kind of dumb blondes that we have typically narratively told ourselves through jokes and different things like that. So when I started sharing my story, stepping in front of the camera and started sharing my expertise, all of that changed. Yes, people still occasionally, when we're at a networking event, I shake their hand and they might discount me originally, but when they go and look up my portfolio or my now online presence, they start to recognize me in a different light. And so the reason I'm sharing this story is because I genuinely believe that more females need to be getting out there so that we can change the overall narrative. It's not the guys' issues for looking down upon us. It's actually the females that are holding themselves back from really getting out there and sharing their message. So if you have the slightest desire to do this, or if you find that you are experiencing the kind of negative sides of being a female that I have previously explained in terms of being looked down upon or anything like that, then you have to take ownership and start recognizing that you are in control of this and you can change the narrative and step out of it. I think back to my grandparents and think about my grandmother as she was going through all of that with the refugee camp and moving to a new country with very little money. And I think about the opportunity. It makes me emotional, to be honest, but the opportunity that we have to really share our message with the world. And you can't take that lightly. Let's clean up here. So think about this. I know it's I'm out there, I'm explaining these things. I'm very curious to see how this video goes. Super different than what I typically talk about. So that's like really the why of why I believe more women need to get out there and start sharing their message. Because by me getting in front of the camera and sharing my story, I might inspire one other female to do the same. And that one other female might inspire other females to do the same. So it's really this effect that we as females can start to change this narrative for the next generation so that their battle isn't as strong as ours might be. And yes, I know that this has been going on, the female rights movement has been going on, women's rights movement for a long time, but you have to look at your specific generational grandparents and say, has it been going on a long time in your family? It might not have. It might have been in other people's, but not in yours. So how do you get started? If this is something that is speaking to you, how do you get started? I have a quick start guided video that I highly recommend watching. It is a 15-minute series and it's 100% free. All you have to do is plug your name and email in, and that is just so that I can send you some encouraging emails along the way. And it walks you through how to start thinking about your first 5 video topics and how to write your scripts so that you can step in front of the camera and really start sharing your message. I would love to personally hear from you and be your coach as well. So go ahead and follow me on Instagram, subscribe here if you haven't already, and let's really make this a movement of women stepping in front of the camera and sharing their message with the world. So I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I did creating it, and I am excited to see the ripple effect that comes from it. I'll see you in the next video.